So thanks for joining us this evening. It's our sixth in our series of online artist talks. So during this month, we actually have 4 talks programmed as we're currently in residence with Guest Projects Digital. These talks are part of our Sustainable Darkroom project, for which we ran a digital research and development residency throughout the month of April. During this, we explored the themes recycle, remove, repurpose, and rework. Following this, during this month, July, we are building and refining on this research with the help of scientists and experts internationally to create a virtual test lab for artists internationally. This residency this July is generously funded by Guest Projects and the London Community Support Fund, with support from Gasworks and the Triangle Network. In its total, the Sustainable Darkroom is an ongoing series of residencies, talks, workshops, and events set up to give practitioners the chance to research and share approaches to fostering a more sustainable and environmentally friendly photographic darkroom practice. So this evening, we're joined by 3 artists from varied creative backgrounds who all utilize and reutilize waste and discarded materials throughout their practice. I'm really excited to share their work and their practices with you this evening. So I'll just introduce them all. First talking, we'll have Charlotte Padgham. Charlotte is a London-based visual artist and jewellery designer maker. She works across a variety of media with an emphasis on experimentation and self-sustaining cyclical process. Themes of transition, manipulation, ephemerality, and imperfection are explored using found objects, waste material, and organic matter, fused with precious and semi-precious elements. She has a fascination with texture, degradation, and decay, and in the traces and residues left behind, often using the body as a tool and material to explore the transference, intervention, and preservation of the self, bodily presence in absence of the body. Next, we'll hear from Michaela Davidova. Michaela is a Czech artist currently based in Tilburg, the Netherlands. She often works with found objects, finding the new meanings for items that have been wasted. She's intrigued by the thingness of the light-sensitive material and the memory of matter. As a pinhole photographer and craftivist, she tackles her concerns with the light-sensitive properties of the photographic paper and with the creative engagements in the public realm. She is often travelling with her bicycle long-distance journeys and using a dark sleeping tent as an improvised darkroom off-grid. Lastly, we'll be joined by Katrina Stamatopoulos. Katrina is a Greek-Australian artist based in London. Her interests are located amongst meanings of agency and subject, what we consider real, scientific, and surreal, and how we constantly misperceive through photography. Focusing on a variety of image-making perspectives, Katrina works amongst pinhole photography, chemigrams, darkroom experimentation, scanography, film, sound, and video. So each of these artists will talk for roughly 20 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time for questions from the audience at the end. I'll just ask you all to keep your microphones on mute to avoid any disruption to the dialogue. And then if you have any questions, you can please write them in the comment section and I'll read them out and ask them to the artists at the end. So now I'll hand over to Charlotte if you're ready.
I'm ready. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen with you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So thank you very much, Hannah, for inviting me to take part in this evening's talk. And I'm really pleased to be joining Michaela and Katrina. I'm looking forward to hearing from them and looking forward to their work too. I'm Charlotte Padgham. I'm an artist and jewellery designer maker based in South East London. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of my work and processes, then about my participation in the LAPC Sustainable Darkroom Residency back in April, and then finish up with a few ideas and projects I have that came out as a result of that. So I actually found this talk a little bit difficult to plan, as my work and my process isn't quite as linear as PowerPoint wants me to be. So I'm hoping this doesn't come across as too fragmented. So apologies in advance. In fact, I'm not sure if I'm going to follow it either, so good luck everyone. So my work is essentially rooted in what's discarded, in degradation, the textures and traces we leave behind, and in the potential of preservation, renewal, and recontextualization. The starting points for my work lie in found objects, in waste materials, and organic matter, which includes myself. I'm interested in reactions, manipulation, intervention between found materials and traditional materials and techniques. So I'm just going to show you a very small selection of jewellery made using found materials. This was a range of jewellery used using a stash of carrier bags that couldn't be recycled back in the day. And I manipulated the plastic into material that could be textured and shaped. This is actually some melted aluminium I salvaged from the ground from a burnt out car and turned into jewellery. I loved the textures. I thought they were amazing. I thought they needed a new life. Another piece of jewellery from the ill-fated car, the glass from a smashed window. That was all that was left of the car because it had been stolen, set in resin here. I very often use my own body as a tool and material in my work. These are some images from a project that I called We Are All Around Us, which used Hoover dust. The picture in the bottle, the pill bottle there, was called What's the Matter? This is Hoover dust, believe it or not, photographed through a microscope. Strands of my fallen hair dipped in wax and latex, originally presented as an installation and also as a piece of jewellery, sort of readornment. Again, my hair, there's a running theme here, encapsulated in resin to be reworn. And my hair, again, made into paintbrushes, which I do actually use quite a lot. Sometimes I don't quite make it to the stick, sometimes it's still attached to my head. So harnessing order and chaos, as well as being a unique personality trait of mine, I'm interested in the control and spontaneity of the combinations of materials and processes I use to create work that has the potential to, or the feeling of being able to continue transforming and evolving over time. I focus on reworking, reusing, repurposing, and recycling as many materials as possible within my art and across my art and jewellery practices by incorporating remnants, waste, or certain elements or ideas from one piece of work to develop and construct a new one. As an example, acetates digital negatives from photographic prints such as these, then become resists for etching texture into metals to make jewellery or printmaking plates. And then the acetate is turned into stencils or plates for monotype printing. As standard practice, all silver and wax-off cuts and filings are melted down and reused. I recycle all waste paper from my studio back into surfaces for printmaking, drawing and painting, or as elements for creating and packaging my jewellery. I try to extend the life of the material to give it multiple uses. So just to give you a small illustrated idea of how this works and how my artwork and jewellery feed each other, these digital photographs of my skin led to a series of contact prints of myself onto found glass and mirror. So I physically laid on the glass, and the residue left from my skin was then revealed using fingerprint dusting powder. Being unprotected, the nature of the prints meant that they were very easily damaged and erased, preserved only on camera, quite badly, I think. However, the glass was then able to be reused for further similar prints and also for printmaking as an inking surface or for monotypes. Both the first digital photos you saw and the glass prints were used then as negatives for a series of experiments in the darkroom using liquid photographic emulsion on recycled papers and old Tyvek overalls and a few other discarded objects like that jar. Let's see that. These are a few examples of my Skins jewellery collection, again incorporating the physical transference of the imprint of my own skin as they are being formed. The digital negatives of my skin and hair were also used as a resist to etched copper, which then became pieces of jewellery and plates for printmaking. So here is a recent example of how I used a couple of these copper plates for my printmaking. This series, I called Remnant, I made in the very early part of lockdown. It started as a straight print run from 2 of my copper plates onto some remnants of paper in my studio. And whilst making them, I started to intervene by varying the consistency of ink, the dampness of the paper, and reworking any imperfections with whatever materials I had at hand. Every single print made, each variation, is part of this series. In fact, you'll see a few of them currently being shown in an exhibition called The Art of Isolation, which is in Rod High, South East London. The copper plates also continue their life and have also become artworks in their own right, forming part of my relic series. So this cyclical process or circular economy means I'm continually using the resources I have, making sure that materials and equipment multitask across disciplines. I love seeing how far I can push and extend the life of what I have around me. But it also helps me think ahead and take responsibility for addressing any consequential waste in making and incorporate it as part of the design process. This means that if I make something, any waste stays in my studio until I reuse or recycle it, which is actually a really good deterrent, and I really recommend it. If I can't incorporate it or recycle it in any way, I either rethink how to make it more efficiently next time or just not at all. So recycle, reduce, repurpose and rework has really become the heart of my process. Which brings me nicely to the Sustainable Darkroom Residency organised by LAPC, which was a 4-week programme, and it's in April this year, which with each week looking at different aspects, so recycle, remove, repurpose and rework, and I took part in week 1, recycle, which launched at the very beginning of lockdown. So we found ourselves suddenly isolated in our homes and needing to think outside the box a bit in terms of collaboration and undertaking the project remotely. It was actually quite a fitting start to the residency. We had to be ultra resourceful and look at objects and waste in our immediate surroundings from a different perspective. And I think that's when you really start to see the possibilities and appreciate the materiality and properties of what we have lying around. The first thing we looked at was resin-coated photographic paper, which can't be recycled because of its plastic coating. The group was tasked to try making it into a paper pulp clay and experiment with it in that form. I also wanted to think of ways I could personally reuse and extend the life of the paper within my own practice, and I'd recently been trying dry point etching using Tetra Pak packaging, which has a plastic coating and can't often be recycled either. So that's an informal intaglio printing method traditionally made by scratching into the surface of copper or indeed plastic. So I figured it might be worth a try. So I had such a very expired photochemicals too. Oh, hang on, I might need to show you the pictures of those probably. Yes, I'll show you that in a minute. So yeah, I had a stash of very expired photochemicals and resin-coated paper from over about 10 years ago, maybe more, probably more, that I used to make some chemograms, which you just saw. So this is me trying out the dry point technique. So one of the least successful chemograms, as you can see, there's not a great deal going on there, but they had some very faint traces, which I thought were really interesting and gave a really interesting sort of line. So I traced over those using a sharp point as per the dry point method. I printed it, and it sort of worked. So I made several to see how long the plate lasted. The resin got a bit sticky because of the constant wetting of the print. But if I didn't do too many in one go, it actually held up, and I really like the quality of line that it's given. So I think I'm going to pursue that in the future. So now I have a full tray of used fixer. I moved on to what I was actually invited into the residency to investigate, which was the recovery of silver from spent ammonium thiosulfate fixed bar. I use 100% recycled sterling silver in all of my jewellery. It's of the exact same high quality, but reuses material that's already in circulation. So it's recovered from industrial use, electrical parts plating, also medicine. So interestingly enough, my usual supplier said that silver from the photographic industry and X-rays wasn't actually incorporated into their recycled silver, so I'm going to look into that in more detail at some point. So I wanted to test whether it was possible to claim any of the silver in my fixed bar on a very DIY domestic lockdown scale to be used directly within my jewellery practice, or at the very least be able to send it off to my refiner to recycle along with my other silver scrap. So this setup is based on a method, after a lot of research. This is based on a method I found on a Dutch radio hobbyist website. It's a very simple electrolysis setup, and he used this setup for silver placing radio parts, and it just so happened to suggest using photographic fixed source of silver. So with sustainability in mind, I replaced his suggested 6-volt torch battery with a 6-volt lead acid battery that can be recharged using, I think, well, I'm pretty sure I've done some research, a solar panel, which is ideal, and is also 100% recyclable. I also wanted to use as much as I could that I already had in my studio. So I'm just being blinded by the sun that's just decided to show up. So yes, so I wanted to use what I had in my studio already to create this setup. So in the picture you can see a multimeter, which normally I'd be able to get from work, but because of that I couldn't, but so I borrowed it from a very kind neighbour. The anode was a graphite stick from my drawing supplies. The cathode, some stock copper that I already had from my jewellery making. Single cable from a stash again that I already had that I was going to recover the copper from and use. Bulldog clips from my studio, and a beaker made from a drinks bottle. So first I was going to try the brush plating method, which is what he used to plate the very small parts, the regular parts. And he suggested using a sponge, an old kitchen sponge attached to the anode. And then you essentially just saturate the sponge with the solution, the sulfate solution, which will then have the silver on it, and then you just brush it on the cathode. I tried that, it didn't work particularly well, so I tried a thinner piece of cloth, just from an old cleaning cloth, and that worked a bit better. I think the absorbency was better, but in terms of conducting a proper test, I settled for the tank method plating, which you can see it's just immersed in the solution. So the first trial was bizarrely successful. I wasn't really expecting the results that came about, and also I wasn't convinced that there was even that much silver in the fixed bar. I made probably 10 chemigrams, so 10 very, very small chemigrams, or A6 chemigrams. So I'm surprised the amount of silver that leached out, but that might have been because they were expired too. So this one was on a very, very low amperage. But so on closer inspection, after being really excited by the shiny thing, the plating was quite thin, and it was quite easy to remove just through quite light polishing. So then I tried higher amperage, and the plating was much more even and much thicker. However, you can see that it tarnished very, very quickly from the sulfates in the fixer, and despite cleaning it, it just kept coming back. So one of the main reasons jewellery actually tarnishes is because of the sulphur in the air. Sulphur is also used in the jewellery industry to patinate metals and give that sort of grey or black finish, normally using liver of sulphur, which I think is potassium sulfide. Or in the jewellery, added gold extra version. So the next stage of my experimentation in this vein, I think, will now be to figure that out and find out a happy medium. So I'd welcome any input from any chemist, please give me a shout. So I turned the very, very first piece, the very sort of patchy piece, into a simple cuff bracelet. And I actually really love the texture of the uneven plate. So far it's remained quite stable. the nature of plating anyway is that it will gradually wear off with use. So that's why it's not normally used for things like rings and bracelets, because they get a lot of wear and tear. But this, I love the effect of this. So I've started to get quite a lot of ideas on how to use the plating in this way with this particular aesthetic, which is quite exciting. So silver plating, particularly in jewellery and silverware, is an extremely fine science. And there's a reason why there are specialists out there. It involves a lot of very carefully considered and measured factors: pH, temperature, current voltage and materials used for, and the current density of anodes and cathodes, quality and stability of solutions, the ability of accurately measuring silver saturation solutions, pre and post treatments, etc., etc. So it was no surprise really that the process of plating with very basic, uncontrolled conditions and equipment and unrefined solutions was going to give inconsistent results. However, some plating was definitely achieved, so it's reassuring that even if it turns out I ultimately can't reuse the silver directly, I can still recover as much as possible and then send it off to my refiner for recycling and reusing in that way. But I'm going to continue experimenting, but very much within the parameters of domestic studio scale. I think there's quite a lot of potential. So projects on the horizon coming out of residency, I'd like to do the same process of reclamation of silver, but using cathanol to develop and see if that makes any difference at all. And then see if it's possible to reuse the salt water for electro-etching metal, then recover the metal again from that to hopefully be able to continue reusing the salt bath in that way. The paper pulp, I finally want to get round, Hannah's laughing, I basically had the paper sort of pulping for, well, in that middle picture, that was when it was first being pulped. It was left in there for about a month and a half and was starting to grow a personality. So I will eventually, this is my plan, to get around to actually using it, make the clay, and then use it to make jewellery elements, or to use it as a material to create moulds from. And also see whether any silver can actually be recovered from the water drained from making it. I also want to experiment plating onto conductive paints by making my own graphite paint from what I have in my studio already, and to use the recovered silver to silver plate paintings and drawings back into photographs and chemograms, and those jewellery elements made from paper pulp clay. Ultimately, I want to create systems across my photography, jewellery and artwork practice with minimal equipment, particularly with metal recovery and filtration in mind, so that solutions can potentially be reused. And again, if there are any chemists out there who want to give me a hand, get in touch. So, I'm so sorry, I think I should have moved it over a little bit. But as being a multidisciplinary artist, I've become increasingly aware over the recent years that it's essential to become more mindful and economical. For one, of course, there's the financial expense of working across so many disciplines, but also the sheer amount of stuff you accumulate to make this work: the materials, the equipment, the paraphernalia, the packaging, all the packaging. So I'm incredibly aware that everything I do and everything I use has a consequence. This has really reinforced and enforced my process, and it's helped me focus my practice with this cyclical way of working. In a world when you can do anything, it doesn't necessarily mean you should. I personally feel that restriction fuels imagination. In fact, we've probably all discovered that over the last few months. That's when we become our most inventive, resourceful, open-minded, and most importantly, considerate. And I think collaboration is key. I'd just like to finish up, in the meantime, to say that if anyone's interested actually in reading any more details of some of the steps I'm taking personally to become a more sustainable artist and maker, I'm not an expert. I'm really not an expert. It's a journey. It's definitely a work in progress. I'm also collating a page on there of actionable resources, particularly for artists. So I'd be really interested in any feedback on that and any suggestions to include, or if you have any questions, just drop me a line. Also, finally, a huge thank you to Hannah and LAPC for opening up and enabling a dialogue between artists and across disciplines to share resources. and collaborate towards sustainable practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was so wonderful to see how all of your different practices as an artist flow between each other and influence each other. It was really real delight, and I've got so many ideas whirring around, and I'm really excited to hear about where you're moving things next. So next, I'll hand over to Michaela if you're ready.
Hello. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be part of the talk on sustainability. I've been thinking what to actually include in my presentation, because I've realized that all my projects basically touch in some way or another on recycling or reusing or dealing with humans' responsibility and how we actually stand up in front of the environment and for the values for the future. And I've been always interested in found objects, in rubbish, in litter. And this probably multiplied quite a lot when I moved to London in 2013 from Czech Republic, from quite smaller town. Suddenly I was in this huge city where the people could find anything on the street, from food, clothes, electronics. There were just objects laying behind the corner, waiting for the garbage collectors, dumpster divers, or artists to collect them. And I also started with pinhole photography. And here you can see the picture from 2015. Do not climb into this container. And I think found objects and pinhole photography became quite a topic in my practice. I'm not sure if this is coming well. Yes. But the project I would like to talk the most, and we will see how far we can get, is the project which I started in 2017. It's called Own Your Own Space, the Hoard of the World Seen Through the Eye of an Aluminium Can. And this is the craftivism and pinhole photography in public space. I started it when I studied in Cardiff. I was always cycling to university over the Pontcanna Fields and Bute Park, which is a huge park laying in the middle of Cardiff. And always I've seen rubbish laying around. And I've been also interested in the theory of new materialism, and that kind of made me think of rubbish as the agent which call to us, and we can respond to the call of those leftover objects. And because I've been looking around myself more, I've realized that there are particular places where the rubbish is present. It can be around the benches, around the pavements, on the windowsills. And with a little bit of learning, I've also discovered that there are two types of littering, which can be active and passive littering, and that people dispose of the litter either actively, and that means that they are basically careless about what they do in their environment, or also passively, and that means that they probably sit on the bench in the park, and then when they leave, they are just not careful enough to actually take what they leave behind. And I named this project first Own Your Own Space because I was trying to think how we make our homes tidy and cozy. Nevertheless, few streets away, we don't care so much. And the concept of the ownership for me goes alongside with the responsibility, and the fact that accepting the space we live in as our home, we are accepting the need to care for its image. And really this became for me hunting for humans, citizens, and also artists' responsibility. And for me, this project is quite crucial because I feel that I'm really growing up with it. It's probably a long-term project which I will do forever, and it will probably translate in different modes. And what it is, and then if I should explain, is that I collect the litter which I find, around the world, wherever I go, wherever I want. And I made this litter into pinhole camera and take the image from the perspective of the rubbish to see how this object is looking on the world. And with the GPS location of this object, I load it to the online map where people can see it in the whole assemblage. For me, it is interesting to ask, who is the photographer? Is it then me? Is it the person who left the litter on the place? Is it the object itself? Is it the wind which moved it? How we can look at it, who actually is responsible for the image which is presented to us. The images which are captured by this rubbish are showing distorted image of the surrounding world. They are usually captured with the aluminium can, because as I found out, this is the most common type of litter which I come across. The place can be kind of familiar, but it shows the view which is almost like a view of an alien who is looking on us from somewhere, from the bushes, from the distance. There are the patches of the developer, there are imperfections which I don't try to control, because I think it's also sometimes quite nice to see that, yeah, the image doesn't need to be perfect. Usually there is a person standing in front of the image, which is obviously me, but due to the long exposures, the person cannot be always recognized, and therefore it can resemble anybody who is standing in front of something what is mysteriously staring at us. And during the time, it got this second caption called "The Heart of the World Seen Through the Eye of an Aluminium Can," which I think, when I was looking at the theory of vibrant matter, according to Jane Bennett, she was quite nicely explaining how the objects are responding to us if we see them in their assemblage. And if I take all those cameras into the online map, which maybe I can show here, then we can see the whole heart of the world presented in front of us. And I would like that people can think about what is our accountability towards the public space, towards the planet, because this alien who is staring at us somewhere under the bench is suddenly something bigger than just littered street behind our house, but it has the global consequence. I started this project in 2017 with the local festival in Cardiff. I spread 50 cameras around the city, and that's probably the experience what almost all pinhole photographer had, with the people noticing the suspicious object left in the park, and I was called to the police to explain. And for me, that was really, I didn't know if I should smile or cry, because I felt quite sad that actually people didn't care about so much litter in the park. But once I turned it into the pinhole camera, they kind of got interested, and I started to do the workshop for people collecting the rubbish and turning it into pinhole cameras, called Pinhole Camera Not a Bomb. And I feel that I quite grown up with it, because when I started, I felt probably very naive that when I will turn those cans into the pinhole camera, suddenly everybody will be finding it, and everybody will kind of cooperate on finding litter. But it's true that not so many people found it. That they probably got lost, they got cleaned by the maintenance crews after some time. And I also started to think that what is accountability of me as an artist, what I leave behind, because obviously with pinhole cameras, from the can you have to make the lid. I was putting at the beginning the photographic paper inside, and I realized that actually I am actually putting some waste into the circulation as well, and I didn't like it, and therefore I'm starting more to take all those elements away, and I just leave the can with the hole and load it into the map, make workshops, and I'm trying to really eliminate what is my impact. While living in Cardiff, I was studying at Cardiff School of Art and Design, and as an assignment for the project of bowls, I've kind of decided to continue with this material of aluminium can, because usually when I start with some material, I kind of get into it and I want to find out more about it. And I've went in Cardiff and collected 315 aluminium cans from the streets and melted them into the bowl in the shape of my hands. And that was quite interesting because during collecting the litter, I met two people. One of them was thanking me that I'm cleaning around, but he explained me that the fact that Cardiff can be quite messy is because people who come from valleys, where is usually less work, come with certain problems and they struggle and maybe leave their problems behind, problems with the alcohol. So then I kind of realized that maybe the environmental problems are not always only one-sided, and they are interconnected with social and economical, and we have to tackle all of them if we want to respond to the environmental issues. I've decided to choose the shape of the hands, holding them in the palm, because I felt that this is the most natural type of container we used to drink from. And when I thought about aluminium, I'm not sure how it is in UK now, but when I lived there, there was no refund system on aluminium cans, and I felt that we actually put into the circulation so much packaging and so much products, but we actually don't have really any solution for dealing with the waste. And recycling aluminium is quite effective in comparison with taking the raw bauxite ore and making new aluminium. So I wanted to respond to this as well. And lately I was taking on the question, if we are able to carry it full, why does it suddenly become too heavy to be carried further once it's empty? And with this question, I turn into the philosophy of lightness. Basically, how heavy is probably that all our responsibility, all the values we need to stand for, all the correct way we should be is actually standing heavy on our shoulders. And this philosophy of lightness, according Nietzsche and Kundera, when the Nietzsche told us about the eternal return, which stands heavy on human shoulders because the civilizations are coming and repeating their mistakes, bad and good experiences, while Kundera was looking at the fact that the circles are not completely, absolutely identical, and therefore he suggested to talk of unbearable lightness. He had a part of his. In the world of eternal return, the weight of unbearable responsibility lies heavy on every move we make. If the eternal return is the heaviest of burden, then our lives can stand out against it in all their splendid lightness. And so then I try to look on the necessity of taking care of what we leave behind and the image we want to present, and how we can contrast this lightness and heaviness and how we can actually deal with it. I'm not sure how much time I have now. If
when you've got another 10 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the introduction, you've mentioned the cycling and the way I travel. So for me, also recycling means this recycling, and I've abandoned flying some time ago, and I hope that it will stay this way for some time. And in 2019, I made this project imprint in Wales, and I've cycled from Cardiff to Bangor with my bicycle and with my darkroom in the suitcase and the camping tent. And I made this machine from the discarded 3D printer, which is printing with the light on photographic paper every day of my route. And I was thinking of comparing this cycling. For me, this is the most honest way of traveling. When I go up, I have to push hard. When I go down, it goes quite easy. And that was probably related to what once my teacher of maths said, that life is like a sine wave, once up and once down. And that's how we kind of have to deal with it, and how we have to make an effort and to go up, while we never can be sure how long we can stay up, because down it can go quite fast. And I took with me the Cafanol developer, because that was something what I started to be quite interested in, reducing any chemicals in the darkroom and go more alternative way. But more towards Bangor, I was cycling. I obviously had to carry more developer, because I didn't want to just chuck it somewhere, although it is probably just the Cafanol washing soda and the vitamin C. I think that we should be always kind of convinced or sure how to deal with our waste, and I thought that this is my responsibility to actually bring it back and recycle it. And along the way, I took this 4 and 5 inch self-made camera obscura, which I made mainly from the pallet wood. I found this pallet in Rotterdam, and sometimes it happens that I see the object and I already know that I have to have it, I have to take it, because that means that I have to turn it into something else. And I found it the 1 year before, but I stored it, and 1 year later I made it into this camera. And maybe here I can finish with the video.
Thank you so much, Michaela. That was so great to hear more about your adventures and how kind of what you see in the landscape and your journeys end up transforming and, you know, having a really big influence and being part of the work you make. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you too.
And then lastly, we're going to hand over to Katrina.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for having me. I was thinking also what to prepare for today's presentation, and I'm mainly going to focus on the projects that came from material collected at the Darkroom that I work at. I work at a photographic lab, and I found that a lot of the waste that is from the lab has become quite exciting material to encounter and to explore. One of the main things that I really focus on with my practice is just the potentiality of an image and what it is to be an image and what it means for us to look at images. And I think that images are so contradictory, like snapping and deleting, remembering and forgetting, being physical, being digital. Our kind of self-image gets lost in this kind of veneer or this skin that it is the image. I mean, what we put forward is kind of a representation. We kind of live in a constant representation of making images and also experiencing things in real time. And I'm always thinking about this kind of parallels that happen with photography. So I'm going to start with this roll of water damaged food dye paper, which luckily and happily landed in my hands at the lab. I took it home, and when I was peeling it off, you could kind of see all these different colors that was from being wet and dry, and the reactions that had been taken place through just kind of sticking together as the paper was. So together with my boyfriend, we decided to kind of take on this roll of paper, and we took various bits of it out to different environments. We'd leave it there, would come back and see what happened, kind of just facilitating, I guess. And then we were also, you know, going a bit further with using acidic substances to make reactions, and just to see having that kind of control and lack of, and just seeing what would happen. This was a window display where we placed the paper to expose for a month, and it's called Please Don't Touch, Exposure in Progress, which is kind of a common note that I've been leaving on pinhole cameras placed in various public places as well. So that's kind of, I think it just carried over because it's in a window, so it's not really going to be touched. Anyway, this is a nighttime shot of the paper, and it really did drastically change over the month. So it was quite interesting to see, and also bring it in and unravel the end bits which hadn't been exposed. But I'll just show you a couple more experiments that happened. With this, it's quite interesting because, I mean, paper that isn't used for printing, I'm specifically speaking from the darkroom and being kind of in the industry where things get wasted, and the idea of analog is almost become an image in itself. You know, people would like to keep the rebate on the film in the scan or on the print, and there's almost this desire to want people to know that you shot on film. So this kind of fixing of the analog process also was relevant in the fixing of this paper, because the only way to fix this is that you're going to scan it, because the paper is just continuously changing. It kind of is a bit of a skin, so any scarring is going to change in light condition, or I don't know, with a drop of water. It's still really sensitive, so even if it is overexposed and unusable for the lab, it was still very active and very exciting to play with. This is another shot of, yeah, these ones that were taken to the Hackney marshes in various locations and brought back in. The next project I'm going to talk about is is called Body Scan, and it's a film that I made with Alexandra Spence, who's a sound artist, and she also uses a lot of analog materials in her practices. In her practice, she uses a lot of tapes and burying tapes, and we kind of joined tape forces in this one. Do you mind if I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen because I've actually got the film here, like in physical form. I just want to show you. I just want to show you because this is something that happens at the beginning of your film, before the image starts, and this is something that packing and sleeving film at a lab, it just goes to the bin. So you're just cutting and sleeving. You have this tiny fraction of image, or it's not really image, but I think it's where the emotion starts for kind of the first frame. And sometimes it's different because sometimes there's a lot of space between the image and the actual. They're all different. It depends on the winding of your camera as well. But I kind of had an alternative bin next to the bin at the lab, and I started collecting these bits, and I started taping them together and taping more together, and then it ended up becoming this, which ends up also becoming a moving film, which is really exciting because then the flashes of those little light bits become flashes of image, and the collection of many rolls of film, many people's bits, and many kind of scars of which camera it's been, what temperature it's been in, kind of end up all collecting together. And I'd like to show actually a bit of the film. I got it up on the internet. So this was the kind of beginning of the process where I started to scan it individually, the frames, and then after collecting more and more, I was thinking that what am I going to do with so many? So then that's when the idea of almost sewing these films together like a kind of patchwork seems like a good idea, but still there's so many, and it's so continuous that I don't know if you can do that forever. But this is another still. But that kind of brings me to these two books, which also happened from bits of film at the lab. So I guess with the movement and time, like relating this kind of portion of image with the motion, and even the motion of kind of cutting the film, and the motion of inserting each roll of film into the camera, it kind of got me to think about using an enlarger as a microscope rather than thinking about these bits of film in movement. And the book on the left is called Handbook, and the one on the right is called Bits. So I'll speak about Bits first, which is made from 36 handprints of just discarded elements of film from the lab. So I stuck them in the enlarger and zoomed them in as much as I can on tiny portions, and the biggest that they could go, or that I was finding that they would go, would be sort of a 6x4 print, which was actually perfect because it's quite industry standard size. And it also just makes sense to kind of even make a photo album and have this in your hand as a portable small little object, kind of harnessing these images. And I guess this black box was making me think that it could be a bit like a camera, and this was almost like a salvaged roll of film, but the images were just like spent time with to kind of salvage that roll of film. And here are a few images. So you can see like clip marks from the developing process, or bits of negatives that would be on the floor. This is all full kind of set out, the concertina. But yeah, this image on the left is scratches on the film, and which was just on the floor, and the one on the right was just small portions of film with bits of light that was at the end of a roll. So this kind of honing in on these small details and kind of just being a bit of a rat, like picking up bits and bobs that were lying around, I kind of saw that there was lots of potential image, and what we have in our idea of what a photograph is it really can be anything, and that's what's really exciting. But there also is like some creative control. So I mean, cutting the negative up and making it fit in the enlarger to make kind of that shape on the 6x4 print, because I ended up making a structure for myself. You know, it's going to be 36 prints, has this format. This kind of limitation made me start having to actually kind of intervene, and I think that's always happening in my work, where there's this element of complete lack of control from a found object, and then I kind of have this moment where I do kind of take control, and I think they're going up and down all the time, and that's exciting. And the left is a scan of the book, and there was some images where complete discarded rolls of film were being found. So people either asked us to throw the roll of film in the bin, or they would have moved country and not picked them up for years, and then contacting them, they would say, oh no, I don't want the film anymore. So actually or maybe somebody has got the scans of the film and they don't need the physical film anymore. So this idea of what this roll of film and what the negative is, if it's precious, if it's not precious, it's always kind of changeable, and it is a bit like it is a bit questionable whose possession of and who the belonging of this image is, who this image belongs to. But so portions of images I was starting to find, and I was starting to put aside the negatives that people weren't collecting, which gets me to the next book. That's another image, which gets me to this book, which is a book of hands, and these all come from rolls of film that people have asked the lab to discard, and it was so painful to do such a thing that I decided, with help from my colleagues who were absolutely incredible in putting things aside and helping collect little bits actually, which was really exciting. I started to think how I can connect all these different people's film together, and what I could find that was a link, and how I could actually somehow connect with this anonymous photographer. And I started to crop out bits of body parts and stick the enlarger in and hone in on certain details. And I found that there was just something in the hands, you know, this sensual experience that we connect with our sight as well. Like you can't really think of a feather being soft unless you know how it feels. You know the experience of feeling that feather to be soft. So our visual and our tactile qualities and senses completely just merge. And I think connecting with the hands of the photographer was just made sense for connecting this book together. And the same kind of format, 36 frames in this kind of concertina with these almost bellowing camera formation. I'll just show you these images. And that's what I've kind of got for today, guys. Thank you.
I really like these ideas that you bring up around the idea of, you know, belonging and who does the waste belong to, because legally when you throw something out, or when like a company throws something out in the bins on the street, it's still legally their property. And this kind of notion of, yeah, even though you've discarded something, like who's the owner, and where does that, yeah, waste, kind of the responsibility of the waste lie with. So I'm going to open it up now for any of our audience to ask some questions. And while we wait, I've got a few questions for you guys. So I thought, Michaela, it might be nice if you talked a little bit about She Foundation and what you do with them.
Yeah, so I moved to Tilburg 1 year ago, and I've started my internship in the artist-led organization She Foundation. And then I decided to stay, and I continued, and I kind of got involved with the virtual vitrine project See You Here, which is this year it's themed art and sustainability. So we are trying to research artists and how they relate their art practice to sustainability. And that means that every month we present one artist with their projects online. So it's kind of like a virtual residency, but we don't really necessarily want to call it residency. We want to go it more as a research and kind of see where it can take us. So this will end in December, and then hopefully next year we can make some closing event, maybe all together. Or yeah, the artists are from all over the world, so it would be obviously nice if they all can come and meet. But for now, we stay in touch only online. And for me, it's really important because I don't know. This year I finished my bachelor last year, and this year I feel like I haven't been really making enough or a lot. And I felt that actually I feel quite okay with that. that for me it's now this period of just learning and reading and finding out actually what is important, because I feel that I actually have quite too many ideas, and I know that I'm a doer, and I can just go, and a dreamer, and I can just go on with something. But I actually want to really focus and slow down and find out actually what my practice should say and what's important. So this project there, it really helps me to develop it and find out the community around, and that's why I'm also happy that I got invited here.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see all these kind of new networks and platforms of people connecting and having these discussions and sharing their ideas. So I hadn't heard of She Foundation until talking to you about it. So it's definitely, yeah, something that I'm going to keep an eye on, and glad that you could share it with us.
Anybody is welcome to come and visit us. Yeah.
Great. Katrina, we've got a question for you. Was there any digital editing involved in producing the film, or was that the negative strip playing in real time?
A bit of both. So originally I got that roll digitized, and I ended up having, in that kind of creative control versus letting accidents happen and just kind of taking what is available, because I ended up using the some editing equipment to actually chop and splice the 35mm at the Kodak lab. They were really kind to offer their facilities there to have it edit. So there was editing in that sense physically, and then editing in the digital sense on Final Cut Pro when I worked with Alex for her sound to fit the sound with the image together. So that was a whole nother kind of, and I think that translation process is happening quite a lot, you know, even with the first translation of a scan is an interpretation, and that interpretation is then interpreted by a screen, which is also different to another screen. And I think these layers of almost different lenses of seeing through, yeah, I think they definitely kind of important to me. But yeah, that is edited digitally as well as in analog, both of them.
Yeah, we didn't hear the sound along with it, but maybe that's something we can look it up. Is it free to view on your Vimeo channel?
Yeah, it is. It's called Body Scan.
Okay, I'll put the link for that in the chat. And then
do you want me to type it in?
Yeah, you can put it in the chat,
Yes,
for everyone, and then people can listen to it along with the audio if they want. So we've got a question at everyone. If anyone has any suggestions for Flynn, he's saying, I'm a teacher and would like to find ways of exploring alternative photography techniques with students without using new materials and chemicals. Have you any alternatives to usual photographic techniques in the darkroom?
I think quite nice is a solargraphy to do with students, because you can just put the camera on in September, take it off in December, and then you don't need any darkroom facilities, just a scanner to scan it.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite nice.
Yeah.
To do in the classroom.
I guess the only new material there you'd be using is the paper, but I can't think, it's quite hard to get around having absolutely no new materials. Yeah, even things like, you know, cyanotypes on old scraps and stuff, still the chemistry has to be new. Oh, Andrew suggested Anthotypes. That's a great suggestion. So Anthotypes, you're using plant materials, which I don't know if you'd consider new or not. I guess it's, you know, what is the meaning of new? But Anthotypes from plant materials that I guess could be going in the compost bin, and then crushing them down in a pestle and mortar, and coating that in several layers onto kind of recycled surfaces and recycled papers, and then using that as your photographic surface to expose the image. Anthotypes is a slow process, but again, like done over a few weeks with kids, that could be really interesting. As you mentioned, the scanner in solography, someone's asked, what do you think of the scanner as a sustainable tool, but it needs a digital output, ?
In 2016, I did another cycling trip from London to Czech Republic, and I put some solargraph cameras along the route and picked them up on the way back, and made this pedal powered generator to power my scanner. So I couldn't really develop it on the way. So then in my bedroom, I was running the scanner with my pedals. So maybe that could be the one option.
Yeah, definitely. Really cool. And I guess, you know, things have to have an output in some form. So it's really interesting to question, you know, he's saying, but it needs a digital output, suggesting that digital output is negative, but that's not always the case. In some cases, a digital output could be a good thing. I think so long as we're aware that how, you know, every way that we disseminate an image has some form of impact, it's kind of just weighing up what works for your practice and how you can be most conscious and sustainable about it. In your case, you know, peddling your own scanner definitely seems like taking it to the full level of, you know, being as environmentally conscious as you can. Was it quite hard to, like, did you have to pedal a lot to power it?
It was quite a resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was quite a journey itself, I would say.
I think it's always quite surprising how much energy, like physical man-made energy, you need to power devices that we use so frequently. You know, even things like a toaster or a smoothie blender, it's like you can hardly generate enough pedal power on a bike to power them yourself, and it's really just something that we completely take for granted.
I was just gonna say to Flynn that maybe making photograms from the from the lunch packaging, from the kids' lunch packaging, or even I don't know, being able to tidy up the playground and also finding interesting shapes in the recycled bits there to make photograms could be quite nice to play with shapes and light. In the darkroom, there is, of course, like if you're using new papers and chemistry, I mean, there's, yeah, like you said, it's quite difficult to get around doing every step in a way you're not kind of using something new, but I don't know, that could be interesting to try.
Yeah, definitely. Great suggestion. So if there are no other questions from the audience, and I think we'll wrap it up here. We just had a nice comment back from Flynn saying, I like the fact you used old paper that you had been given. I've been given some old colour film, which I might try some chemgrams with. Thanks again. Also, with your old colour film, you can try Phytograms, which is where you soak plant material in a solution of washing soda and vitamin C, and then place that plant material directly on top of the film laid out, and that will kind of leave traces of the plants on it. You can look more up on how to do that on, there's a photography website set up by Carol Dewing, and you can see it on there. So thank you, the three of you, for giving such great presentations. It was a real pleasure to hear from all of you, and I look forward to continuing a dialogue in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.